Did you know that we mapped more of the surface of Mars than our very own oceans? How has our curiosity driven us to space travel, but not to explore the most perplexing mystery that lies on our very own planet? I've explored much of our waters myself, mapping and documenting our oceans and seas. I have learned that we are better off to just leave what lies below the waves alone. I grew up by the ocean, and in my youth, I loved to explore the tide pools and sea caves that dotted the east coast. I've loved to see the life interacting with each other, crabs scuttling away when a big swish swam by, or an octopus camouflaging itself undetectable until its prey made their final mistake, of getting just too close. The sea was always just so interesting to me. So when I turned 13, my father bought me a cheap scuba set off the internet. It only allowed for 20-minute excursions underwater, but man if I didn't cherish it. I would dive at least twice a day, blowing all my allowance on air tank fill-ups and footage for my underwater camera. Most of my childhood was spent under the sea. And as I grew, my interest for the water developed from a hobby into a full-fledged career. I received my degree in marine biology with the highest marks in my class and was almost immediately hired by the Poseidon Foundation. Poseidon was a great place to work. I got to travel the globe, documenting new species and reclassifying the old ones. Here, I met people who shared my passion for the waters on Earth and discovering what actually dwells within them. Now as a model employee, my data never had mistakes and was never once late. I quickly rose through the ranks until I was the right-hand man of the CEO, Barry Henderson. He was an amazing man with love for the oceans that even surpassed my own. The man had a twinkle, a spark of curiosity that all great explorers possessed. And he wasn't my boss, but my friend. Barry's life goal was to chart the bottom of the Mariana's Trench, the deepest pit in the world. Every time we were together, it was the same old story. "What do you think said the bottom?" he would ask me. Something new, I'd always retort. And one day, me and you, we're going to go down there. Of course, an expedition to the bottom of the ocean would cost huge sums of money, which would simply bankrupt the company, but I knew Barry would be unable to rest until he got what he desired. Now, it was a rainy afternoon. I was sitting in my office drinking coffee and finishing up a report on the new species of starfish my team had discovered off the coast of Australia, when Barry burst in. "Lucas, it happened. By God, it's happened." "Huh?" "The department accepted my request to fund our expedition to the bottom of the sea. And the following months were spent preparing the submarine, and it had to be perfect. That far underwater would put tons of water pressure on every square inch of this hull. And I could hardly contain my excitement for what actually laid ahead, what kind of diverse life we could find that existed that far below the waves. Only one expedition had ever been made before ours, and it lasted less than 20 minutes. Our submarine was designed to be submerged for over 20 hours. Barry and I would be true modern-day pioneers. The Triton finished construction in less than 2 months, and by God, the thing was a tank. 40-inch thick walls left more interior space than to be desired, but it was plenty of room to house just the two of us. The best flashlight money could buy was mounted on the bottom, illuminating whatever lied in front in dazzling white light. 2 robotic arms were attached to either side, giving us the ability to grab whatever was lying there to meet us and document it. We submerged on the 12th of July. The excitement that boiled inside me as we sank to the ocean completely pushed aside the nervousness that accompanied anyone facing the unknown. And I could barely sit still as we sank further and further into the murky depths. "We'll reach the bottom in less than 10 minutes, Barry exclaimed. "You have not experienced true darkness until you have been to the bottom of the ocean. Any traces of sunlight dies miles above us, leaving me and my partner in the utter blackness that is the deep sea. Even our fluorescent light had dimmed down to nothing but an orange glow. We could see less than 20 feet in front of us, but that didn't stop Barry or I from getting straight to work. In less than 45 minutes, we had discovered over 32 species of deep-sea fish, 3 types of crustaceans, and over 2 types of octopi. It was marvelous. Never in my life had I had so much fun. The biology in the trench was so diverse and unique, I had never even seen anything like it before. Barry and I were discussing our first-hour findings when we felt a jolt to the right side of the ship. It knocked us back several feet and sent me out of my chair and onto the floor. "Who's that? Are you okay?" Barry had screamed. Of course, no one had heard him. Along with the petrifying darkness came soundlessness. The world below was mute, and it held this very disturbing vibe. "I'm fine," I said, pulling myself back to the chair. Barry didn't answer. This thick, long maroon tentacle did. slapping the front glass with a gut-wrenching, meaty sound. What in the actual hell, Barry had cried out. The tentacle, which must have been about 25 feet, wrapped in front of our machine like a fish caught by a squid. I was dumbfounded. Was it a giant squid? No. They don't live that deep underwater, and it wasn't possible. It had to be something new. I sprang into action and took control of both the robotic arms. I gripped the tentacle firmly as the machine could, and ripped it off furiously. Whatever it was attached to quickly scurried away. Barry had started muttering something but didn't finish. We both knew that we had just discovered something, and we had discovered something big. I decided to follow it, and the submarine turned into the direction the thing went. We followed a trail of half-eaten fish and overturned stones, something we had both not had expected to see that deep. A spear. It was made from some kind of metal, and it looked almost new. "This is freaky," Barry had stated. We followed the trail further, neither of us wanting to give up on what could have been the biggest discovery of the decade. But then it happened again. Harder. The familiar jolt and thudding sound this time knocking us both out of our chairs. Jesus! Then it had come again. Another thud. And from the opposite side of our cramped ship, then another, and then another, and another. And it happened like rapid-fire, hit after hit. I felt like I was stuck in an intense game of Pong. And then we saw it, an unintelligible mass moving slowly towards us in the thick blanket of darkness, edging closer and closer every minute. It was not a squid coming towards us, nor was it an octopus. It was a monster. It had the face of a human. If humans had lived at the bottom of the ocean, huge, glazed, solid black eyes dominated the monster's menacing face. Gills pocketed its neck, appearing to be slashes made by a knife. Elongated arms that extended from the bony sides of the creatures ended in pale, webbed hands, with inches-long claws jutting out from its grotesque fingers. It had fins, too, where its hair should have been, and on its forearms? The most disturbing part of the monster was below the torso, where its legs should have been, was instead of massive thick tentacles that wriggled and squirmed around like worms in a bucket. It clutched its spear firmly as it opened its mouth, revealing several rows of needle-like teeth. Nothing escaped its mouth except a deafening screech that could be nothing but a war call. Instantly, the thudding began again, but this time faster and much more furiously. The creature that we did see whipped its spear at our windshield, rattling it uneasily, giving the impression that while strong, it was not impervious to damage. "We have to get the hell out of here," I heard Barry shout. Once again, grabbing the joysticks that control the arms of our vessel, I swatted crazily at the pack of devils that surrounded us, but it was hopeless. One of them grabbed the left arm with its jagged teeth and ripped it off like it was chicken on a bone. These creatures were strong, intelligent, and worst, out for blood. Another ripped the arm off. As the spear ricocheted off the glass again, we were in trouble. We were at their mercy as they learned and teamed up on us like a pack of wolves. "Pull her up," Barry had cried. I jumped into gear. As much as I loved the sea, I refused to die down there in this metallic coffin. I shifted our propellers downwards and shot our submarine up as fast as the damn thing could go. The Murdanoms gave chase. They didn't want us to leave. I counted 13 more spear hits before we were out of the trench and desperately radioing in for extraction. We waited at the surface of the water in the Triton for less than 5 minutes before the helicopter came. I guess they heard desperation in our voices. It hovered over our heads and released a rope ladder for us to climb to our escape, away from that watery hell. I hopped on first and began my ascent up. Barry began to climb after me when suddenly an all-too-familiar tentacle burst out from the surface, wrapping itself around his leg firmly. And before I could even scream, he was below the waves and out of reach. There was nothing I could do. Barry's life had been claimed by what he had loved very most, the ocean. And I didn't just lose my friend on that day, I lost my passion. It has turned into an undying fear of water, and I can hardly take a bath without the thoughts of dreaded tentacles bursting through the drains and finishing the job, and dragging me back in down to those very depths. I think it's safe to say that I'll never really return to the ocean. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was a real-life story, well, real fiction, I guess you could say, on the Mariana's Trench. For those of you who don't know, it is the deepest trench in the world. This is where the deepest part of the world's oceans can go to. It's basically south of Japan and north of Papua New Guinea. And basically, this, again, while it is the deepest part, there have been expeditions that have been planned into the area. Well, planned, and then there were some descents into the area, some actual descents, but at the end of the day, like most of our world's oceans, it does remain very unknown. It's a big unknown at the end of the day. We do really know more about outer space, I guess you could say, than we do know our own oceans. Now, of course, you might understand that the more and more we look into it every year, more and more new species come out of there, and that's all good and well, and as time goes on, we're going to be exploring more and more as technology gets better, sonar technology, all that kind of stuff, to really map out the stuff better than we could before, especially when it comes to going deep down, because you have to remember, like the story dictates, going deep down into the ocean floors can really almost take all the senses out of you, both audio and, auditory, visual, sensory perception goes out the fucking window when you go down that deep. And frankly, as time gets on, time gets better, and new technologies get discovered, the Marianas Trench will become less of a mysterious location than what it currently is. And it's not just the Marianas Trench, there's many other locations all over the world where we have deep pockets of water, the deep ocean as you could call it, that hasn't really been discovered. And what interests me most about these stories is, like outer space, it also gives you a little sense that there is a bit of the outer space phenomenon as there as well, because when you have so many unknowns, your mind starts filling in the gap of what could be there. Now, of course, a lot of this stuff reminds me of a lot of the Cthulhu mythos, where you have the old gods and whatnot, and I love whenever that mythos gets brought up, and whether it be like in movies or video games. More recently, Bloodborne, for example, where the stuff gets mentioned, and you get into this old world mythology where you get to really cover parts of the world that, again, we have never really even seen to this day by our own eyes, which is crazy to think, because we do have the ability to get there better than we have the ability to get, say, to Mars or something right now at the current point in time, but we just haven't done it. And because of that alien feeling down there, who really knows what the heck is actually there? Because every day, whenever we dig deeper into the oceans, or we dig deeper into parts of the world that we've never really seen, because there do exist parts of the world that we just really haven't seen yet, and we discover newer and newer species, sometimes species that completely blow our minds with how unique and different they really are. Who's to say we won't really find some creepy, monstrous being down in the seas that, frankly, would attack us with similar intellect like this? At the end of the day, we've got giant squids, we've got giant everything out in oceans. Who's to say this kind of stuff doesn't really exist, right? Of course, you'd be taking a pretty big leap at that point, and you'd kind of have to throw logic a little bit out the window, but at the end of the day, it's better to just believe a little bit than to completely be a sour sport and not really believe in anything at all like that, right? I mean, it's always fun to give up a little bit of the realm of reality, which is why creepypastas are great in the first place, because you sort of are obligated to give up a little bit of that for these to be as interesting as they are at the end of the day. But, as always, there's not really much to say, like the oceans, The story is interesting, the story is decent, told really well, it's got a sad ending, I guess you could say. Barry, it unfortunately went away, and frankly, in memory of Barry, we just have to keep digging away at what's really down there, right? So, I guess at the end, instead of asking you what would you change to make it better, what would you rate, I would ask you, what do you think is all the way down in the oceans below? This has been another episode of Creepypasta as part of Haunted Gaming. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.